Okay, welcome everybody to the latest edition of WorkReduce Live. We'll wait for a minute while the participants roll in here. And this is our, I think, sixth in a series of webinars where we talk about key industry topics for media buying. And we have an exciting panel today. I'm really pleased to have two global leaders of agencies with us, and we'll be talking today about agency transformation. And these guys have some history with each other, so it's going to be fun. And in particular, you know, Helen seems really sassy, so we'll be counting on some of that sass to come in. So we'll just give this one more minute while some of the attendees flip over. And then I'll dive into some intros. But, you know, quick plug for WorkReduce. We are a staffing and talent platform for the media industry. We serve all facets of the buy side of the industry with staff augmentation and our service desk model, you know, allowing you to make your business in media more effective and efficient by accessing the talent that you need faster, better, cheaper in some cases. And we're really pleased to work with a lot of companies out there, including all the holding companies and a lot of brands. So it's our pleasure to welcome you all today, and especially Michael Epstein and Helen McRae. So I'm going to introduce these guys as a starting point, and then we'll dive into some of the key questions that we want to cover. So first off, Helen is the CEO of Mindshare EMEA and the CEO of the Mindshare Worldwide Client Group, previously CEO of Mindshare UK, and a lead on the Unilever account, dating back to 2004. And I didn't know this, Helen, a Carnegie Mellon grad. That's pretty cool.
True.
Very, very good school. So we're also joined by Michael Epstein, formerly of Mindshare and currently the CEO of Carat. Michael is the CEO of Carat, CEO Carat.
I have a few titles, unfortunately.
Right, and the CEO of Dentsu Aegis media brands and products. So a lot of responsibilities between the two of you. And I think what's fun here is these two have worked together in the past, so have a nice rapport. So I'm looking forward to some good back and forth as we dive through this. So
Helen may or may not be the reason I don't work at Mindshare anymore.
Well, I thought that was off limits.
For good or for bad?
For comments. Now, you guys in the audience, looking forward to your questions. You can pop that open. I'm going to keep the chat and Q&A open here. Submit your questions through either one. We occasionally have some pretty lively back and forth in the chat. You're welcome to let loose there. I'll pick out some key questions that come out of the Q&A and chat and direct them to these guys. But to kick it off, I guess the key question I've got as I think about these two very large agencies, part of two of the five major global conglomerates, is, is this model working? Like, does the holdco model actually deliver value to the clients that they wouldn't get from just a very large agency? And is that actually holding things back? So let's start off there.
Do you want to go first, Helen?
No, you go first, Michael.
Yeah, for you. I think the broad answer is yes, Brian. But I think, like any industry, the holding company model, if you want to call it that, has to evolve. I think there's probably some negative connotation just from the name holding company. And depending on who is talking about it and when, they talk about holding companies as holding things. But if you work in a holding company, it's way more dynamic than that. So for sure, I think like any organization that has multiple P&L sitting in it, there are some issues that sometimes can cause a bit of complexity. But I think that as an industry, we're evolving, we're working through some of those things. And I suspect, by the way, if there wasn't some utility in holding companies, they wouldn't exist.
And maybe Martin Sorrell wouldn't have started a new one.
Because that's what he's doing.
Well, there we go. There we go.
He mentions he wants to slam WPP. He's starting his own holding company. Might call
Well,
it.
that's
So speaking of
that's a,
WPP, Helen, what do you
yeah.
think?
Yeah.
I love WPP. It was interesting when you were talking about, when you were introducing WorkReduce in terms of the USP that you have about being able to be more flexible, to help kind of, and that's very much the purpose of what a holding company is. It does give me, in an agency, the ability to say, okay, if I don't have a specific resource or a specific need at the right time for my client, I can actually go to the holding company and get that pretty quickly to deliver on the client's needs. So I agree with Michael that I think holding companies historically were, it was quite an antiquated construct and quite clunky, and even the name, feels quite kind of static. And I think the larger theme of transformation, just as we talk to our clients about transformation, that's the same for us. We have to adapt and we have to evolve and we have to do it at speed. Otherwise, we will no longer, there won't be any more holding companies. They'll go out of business, and they're still around, and they're still evolving, but they're still delivering value. Yes, 100%.
I would also add, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would also add the notion of a big agency back in the day that did everything had the same amount of complexities that holding companies.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, it's a misnomer. I know it might be in vogue because Helen and I work in media to think that, the unbundling was a bad thing, but they were the same complexities. I can't tell you how many times I was told, no, you're going to go do this because somebody wanted to launch some piece of creative rather than do what was in the best interest. So yeah,
we'll come back to the unbundling concept because I think that's it's interesting and really salient right now.
Mm-hmm.
Will the agency hold, so of the 5 holdcos, I think the majority of them are not growing in North America, which is the world's largest advertising market. Will holding companies return to growth in this market, or are they going to be cannibalized by in-housing a million little agencies or other factors?
I mean, if the smart ones are going to return to growth, and I'm probably working through plans to figure out how to do that, depending on what sector you work in at the moment, lots of people aren't growing, so
it's a tough time. Flat is the new growth, right?
Yeah, for a little while. So I when we talk to clients and even internally, we talk about something called positive disruption. And I think, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. We were on a track for transformation. What has happened to the world has accelerated some of that transformation. But yes, I think they're going to return to growth. At least, as I said, the smart ones will, and you have to sort that out. Frankly, if you were complacent before all of this happened, you were going to wind up in the position that we're in now. It just would have happened in 3 or 5 years' time. So,
and I think, Brian, you mentioned, in-housing, and I think it's for us, maybe historically in-housing, was viewed as a threat, and it's to Michael's point again about if you don't evolve and if you don't reposition and rethink and actually take it, why is this, what is the good thing about this? How can we contribute to this and flip it around and evolve our services to be actually more adept at kind of being reactive and kind of changing? If we don't change, the holding company or any company is going to be dead irrespective of it, and they're not going to grow. Right. And all of our clients are obsessed with growth. And, we talk a lot about, from a WPP standpoint, about, creative transformation and bringing those things together. And it's the same for us as it is for, Dentsu.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is going to drive that growth? We talked yesterday about automation being a factor. Is that, we've been talking about automation for a long time. Like, what's different now?
I think automation is now a necessity for us as a business. It's no longer a nice to have or something that we talk about but actually don't do. I think it's a necessity because if we don't, we always talk about sort of raising the floor and raising the ceiling. If you don't, the automation bit's going to raise the floor to enable you to do the stuff that actually is going to be, arguably more important to our clients and to our business. And we will, it's a necessity. And we're automating. Michael, we were in our pre-calls talking about both sets of holding companies, and the opcos are absolutely automating all of the, different elements of our business at a rate of speed at the moment.
I think what I would say is, you know, Brian, every industry reacts a bit differently to automation. Ours as a collective, and by the way, our clients as well, maybe not as quickly as they should have, but that is no longer the case. And, you know, we're living in a dynamic world. I mean, by the way, we're doing a virtual panel, which I would much rather be in London with Helen than you, or Boston for that matter, which, by the way, is a form of automation. So
Yes.
we're asked to do that. And again, I think the ones that will return to growth and exceed whatever those expectations have to be are going to be the ones that are going to leverage things like technology, things like WorkReduce, by the way, not a plug for you, those kind of solutions that help to drive that kind of change. We just have to do it. And by the way, for the well-being of our people, right? Like we have to make it easier for our people to do their jobs. So,
well, I mean, to your point, doing this, right, for me is a massive cost savings versus trying to get a bunch of people together in London, New York, Boston, whatever. And so we're kind of dematerializing right into this. Has COVID, like, is COVID accelerating savings for your businesses? Do you anticipate, either of you anticipate having fewer offices in the future? Is it going to stay remote? Like, can people work from their homes forever? Like, what's the plan?
Well, I think what's interesting is that COVID put to the technology and a lot of the old rules and a lot of the old assumptions to the test, and actually we demonstrated it is possible. The technology works, and it was in some ways a revelation to say, well, okay, then what is the role of the office? What is the role of coming to work? And how can we have to think about new rules about how we operate as teams. And in some ways it's quite liberating, because what it means is that, for example, this panel, right, isn't then just open to people who are going to be at that location only, but actually could be accessed anywhere in the world at any time. So in some ways, it's actually opened up a lot more opportunities for us, for example, to use our network more. So to say, okay, if we are all working remotely, is there a need anymore to have all of your teams based in one geographic location? Can you not then use, the best talent from around the network to come together to solve a problem, to work as a team, etc. And technology is enabling it, which is now making us kind of reformulate new rules, new ways of structuring teams, and new ways of delivering projects.
Yeah, it definitely, Brian, has expedited it for sure. It's expedited what we were doing anyway. Again, we're all sort of on this journey to begin with. I think, to Helen's point, we will work a bit differently. It has, I mean, I was amazed at how quickly we spun up technology to be able to manage 60,000 people around the world working remotely. Yeah. Generally, it happened around the world pretty damn quickly. And how our technology team was able to spin that up is kudos to them. It's also presenting some, I think, unintended consequences or some conversations to happen that I'm not sure everyone was necessarily prepared for. So I've had conversations with clients who have people that work for them who now want to work remote. They want to move to different cities.
Yeah.
And the conversations around how you support that, how you grow that, your compensation around those models those are all things that we're now dealing with, which we don't have to deal with.
Well, I know for a number of my clients, they just run into the question of like, well, shit, I've got an employee who wants to move to Nevada. Do I have a business nexus there? And can I actually, bill? So anyone who's running into that problem, we've got your back. I've got people in all the states now, so hit me up. But and real estate is one of the largest costs of the holding companies overall. So I just want to press on that one a little bit. Will the holding companies become more efficient by having fewer offices?
I think every company, we said this yesterday, I wouldn't want to be in commercial real estate at the moment. So if you want to talk about returning to growth, that's going to be a really interesting one. But yeah. I think that we were, as an industry, and I do think in certain cases, we sometimes are a bit more progressive than other industries. We're moving in that direction anyway.
Yeah.
Less footprint, less offices, more open floor plans, those kind of things. And again, I just think it's been pulled forward. because of what we're dealing with. How quickly people go back to the office will impact that, but for sure you would think that we will operate a bit more efficiently than we had before.
We'll definitely be more efficient, and I think to your point about the office will be by an appointment or for specific reasons. It won't be the default Monday to Friday. And Michael said as well, this is not just about our industry. This is not just about our, these questions are the same questions our clients are asking, because work and the definition of how we defined work is changing. It's not just the value systems that are changing in terms of people wanting more life balance, but it's actually now been really radically that those whole discussions have now been, brought forward massively. So again, we're having the same conversations with our employees about, well, what does it mean? Can I work from home? Do I have to come back into the office? What is the point of having an office? How can we, I think but on the flip side, I think that actually people do still miss talking to other people and the human interaction, because let's not forget that, we are a service industry. It is about the people, and there are certain, serendipitous moments where you're having conversations, an idea gets, thrown out, and that's where sparks happen. And yes, that can happen, through online and through technology. But I definitely think that the feedback we're getting from people is the one reason that they do miss the office actually is to have those moments.
Yeah. I think it's, and we're starting to see this as we are slowly opening up offices. People want to go back. I just don't think they want to necessarily go back 5 days a week.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
That is not to say they don't want to work 5 days a week. They just might not want to work in the office 5 days a week. But Ryan, to the point that this is happening in every industry, I might have the wrong CEO, so please take that in mind. But I think a couple months into COVID, the CEO of JP Morgan, Chase, said 90% of our workforce is now working from home. It's working wonderfully well. We don't think they ever have to come back to the office. And I'm sure I bastardized that quote, but that is a financial institution that's been around forever that you would never think would utter something like that.
Well, no, what's different with agencies though is, they're not going to be sitting around a kind of whiteboard, creating this like big pitch on the fly and really trying to capture some of those, live in-person dynamics. But you guys are all still pitching, right? So is that, is the magic still happening now, even remotely, or are people coming back together with masks on to figure out these pitches?
I think that the magic is a bit different. So having just gone through a couple of them, it actually humanized the people that you were pitching that you didn't know. And I think the people that we were pitching to didn't know. Right. So, I have 2 golden retrievers who, are jumping on me while I'm trying to do, my little opening, if you will, and I'm pushing them down, and the clients are like, "Oh no, let me see your dog." Right. That would have happened in a conference room. So I think there's I actually think you might in a way be able to get to know the agency that you're talking to in a more human way, which frankly is what I'm trying to do. I will say getting to the work has been a bit harder, to the point Helen was making, you were just making. There's something about being in a room, even if it's at 11 o'clock at night, when you have people working together, ideating on things, that's a bit harder to get across. Like the creativity and the ideation is a bit harder to do in a situation like this. But, I think the process in a way has its own different kind of magic.
Let's take a question from the audience here. Rachel Barrick asking, will the changes that are happening and looking at things on a more remote basis actually change the idea of having P&Ls by office, by region? Could it lead to structural changes in how you guys are accounting and allocating and things like that, or will that stuff persist?
Yeah, I mean, we've never tended to look at office P&Ls. It's generally a bit more by market. So I don't know if that would change. I think you might potentially wind up having to look at a P&L either by client or by brand or by market. But we never really looked at it as yes, like in LA or New York or London, but ultimately it was much more rolled up to the market or the brand. And
but where I do think it will change is that if you are using more talent from different places across your network, then potentially, because the classic way was that by a market, you say, okay, here's my team, here's my P&L, but now what we're talking about, all right, how can I use people that sit in Spain for a client that sits in, in Canada, for example, and how do we create the financial and the accounting mechanisms and the new rules to equate for that, and how does that work? And I think that's again falls into some of the changes that we have to make to our own business. So I do think it will change some of it, because we will have to do. But is it going to be a sea change? No, but I think it's going to we're going to have to be more flexible in terms of how we work and how we use our network and how we use our people and how we use our talent.
But I think
Michael's face says he doesn't agree. This is I don't agree, which is good for a panel. So come on, Michael, disagree with me.
I completely disagree, but I think in certain cases, that's how things are already managed, right? I agree with you that it's going to be easier to hopefully utilize a network versus a market, but and I know that you've done this, having worked with you. You just at that point you're just sort of transferring revenue around, right? To some extent. Now, again, we might move to a more client type P&L or a global or a local one, but I think the mechanisms to do that are already in place. Maybe it'll just make it easier to do that, because there is always the battle of global versus local, which is sort of what you're getting at from time to time, which you and I have had to fight. But I think I think more collaboration will be a good thing, and that is I think what's at the heart of the question.
Yeah, and also not having the requirement for every single market to have to build up the same level of resource, because some markets will not have the critical mass, but they should still be able to do it. So it just means we need to institutionalize some of those ways of working, which we have done in the past, because they're going to become more common than they were historically.
So one complaint about working with agencies, I think on a global level in particular, is
about working with agencies.
No, with you, only with you guys. I think I meant to say that.
Just me.
About another agency who's not on this panel.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, this one was, I heard this, I'm not going to say their name, but it was actually not an actual complaint that, a large global brand approached me about, and we ultimately didn't solve their problem. And they were trying to bring their work in-house. They wanted their global agency to continue to traffic ads because they didn't want to own that function. But the ways of working across regions for this global brand were so inconsistent that the reporting outcomes were bad. Right? Mm-hmm. They couldn't get the team in APAC and the team in LATAM and the team in EMEA, to traffic ads the same way, and it drove really shitty reporting outcomes downstream, And so there's this idea that it's very hard for holding companies, because of their size and complexity, to achieve consistency. Is that a problem you guys can solve? Are those ways of working changing, or have you solved it already?
Well, I faced that problem on a client that you and I know well, and we solved it. So, what we did was we actually did a lot of self-reflection. We sort of diagnosed what the problem was, and we came up with a solution for it. So I think the simple answer is yes. You just
gotta buckle down and solve it.
That is supposed to be the benefit of working with any multinational client or organization, right? Our ability to do that. Again, we haven't always gotten it right. But sometimes when the fear of God is put in you, you can kind of make those changes, and that's what happens. So yeah, the short answer to that question is yeah.
And there are different ways to do that, right? And there are different ways, and one of them could be even, I don't know, using WorkReduce potentially to help achieve that consistency. But again, I think that what's also I think important is that one of the points of transformation, is the need for the agency themselves and our network to be more consistent. And I will put my hand up and say that has been a journey that has been a long time for us to sort of, to again structure the way we look at, ad trafficking or ad serving, and being consistent with our naming conventions and all of those things, which are terribly, terribly boring, but fundamental to be able to deliver great service and insight right, and efficiencies. So it's an imperative, and that's been a requirement for us to change. And it's, as Michael said, that sometimes it's through one model, depending on how the client wishes to operate. So it could be through centralization, it could be through a number of different means, depending as well on how the client is structured and how the client works. So there's not actually just one solution. There could be a few solutions.
Yeah.
I do think,
yeah,
Brian,
yeah, it's interesting.
I know that Helen sort of said it tongue in cheek, but I'll use WorkReduce as an example where in the past, I think agencies and holding companies have always wanted to control everything. And we're not always good at everything. And the sooner you can realize that, the better. And if I just think about the moment in time in which we're living, if this was 10 years ago, we would have probably tried to build our own collaboration platform with our own technology people to build it, rather than using something like a Zoom, or in our case, Microsoft Teams, because we're a Microsoft shop, right? We have them as a client. And I think that has been one of the shifts that has enabled at least us to get over the problem that you've identified, which is, we know what we're good at. We continue to try to improve those things. If we need to build a global collaboration platform, we're going to go out to somebody to help us do that, rather than trying to build it from scratch.
And that also, I think that also shifts to even thinking about one of the other things we were talking about was actually to in-housing, which is, as media agencies, we've always been about the activation, the actual delivery, the doing of the thing. And actually sometimes with in-housing, we've always viewed that as that, historically as, oh, well, that's not what, no, that's bad because that's what we do. When in actuality, I think that, clients have very good reasons for in-housing, and we can still play a partner, be a partner in that, because we work with a lot of startups, and one of the things that they do, they by their very nature are in-housed, and one of the things that we do is provide them an external view outside the bubble. How are people doing it in a different way? Training, in terms of making sure their people are up to speed, and giving them, a point of view on the work that they are themselves doing. So it means that our whole raison d'etre, our whole reason, particularly a media agency, we're beginning to shift to say, actually, our value is not only in the execution, but actually in the strategic advice and partnering with clients. So again, it's another evolution that we are going through ourselves, and recognizing that it's not about doing everything or only doing one thing, but actually that we can do quite a lot of different things.
But I'd like to come back to that. And I avoided making a joke about Marcel there when you were talking about collaboration platforms. It's too easy. But we have another crowd question from Sarah Fay, who I think has some history with one of your companies, who says, with the advent of automation and the promise of significantly reduced time, so efficiency, right? How does that translate into fee structures? And this is something I think is very interesting, right? Is it fair to be compensated based on hours if you're accomplishing more with less? So how much does the compensation model, right, drive weird outcomes? Are you guys being paid the right way if it's by headcount or time and materials? How does that change your ability to automate, invest in automation? Thank you, Sarah. Good question.
I don't know. So I think the commercial models do need to change, broadly speaking, and I'm sure Helen is working on her own sets of new ways to look at it, just as we are. I don't know, though. I think that I'm not sure that automation or a lack thereof has added or has not allowed the compensation models to change. I think that that's just sort of, we're in a position where it's like, we want these people doing these things, right? These types of people to do these types of tasks. Where we're trying to push the conversation is, if we can drive incremental change through automation and operational efficiency, shouldn't we be sharing in that benefit together? Those are the conversations. That's one way. I think the other is where I think, taking automation out of it for just a minute, I think where we sometimes get stuck, and this is the thing we're trying to work with clients on, is they do get, they tend to say, okay, I need this many people doing this many things, but then all of a sudden we get a brief out of left field that's completely, to some extent, unrelated to what we've agreed to. We're trying to figure out ways to build in flexibility into how we create those staffing structures. Sorry, that is Tucker barking.
Good.
See, very human. And how we build flexibility into those structures so that we can more easily do that. I think that that's the other thing that we're doing.
And it's also then about, looking at what the work is delivering to the client. So we talked about actually yesterday about one of the ways in which we are always measured is against some sort of efficiency gain or a media metric or something, and and it's a commodity, right? Whereas actually some of the things that we can do is actually drive business growth. Now, how that works and the level of contribution can vary, but I think we can do a lot more. But we're still, one of my probably biggest complaints is that we're still measured for not all time, but still many times initially in what's your cost, how can I get the best media delivery and quality at the lowest possible cost. And actually and that only pushes us into a media, not just the agencies, but media generally, into a commodity bucket where actually media can contribute to business growth. And so we need to sort of rethink how we are measured and what our KPIs are, because increasingly, and you talked about growth generally, and you look at the economy, everyone's going to be super focused now on growth, right? Because every company's been through a horrendous time with this, and everyone's focused on growth. So should we not be focused on growing the business and being a bit smarter and a bit more, have a bit more depth in how we're measured, as opposed to just looking at cost? But let's be clear, cost is still an important parameter, but it shouldn't be the only parameter.
I think the issue is, in general, when it comes to these things, how do we shift the conversation from we are a cost to we are an investment? Whether that is a commercial model, whether that's in the investment that we're managing. When you just treat it as a cost, you get some of the morass that we're currently trying to work our way through.
I try to shift the conversation that way with my business as well. But now, are active pitches now? Are you guys actively pitching business where this is not on a headcount or time and materials basis? Or are you able to, are you getting technology fees? Like, is this really happening right now, or is it still speculative?
Are you getting technology fees, did you say, Brian?
For example, like, are you able to shift it away from time and materials, or headcount based to either the, growth driven compensation? Is that becoming more common?
But I do think, yes. But again, I think there's always going to be a component of, I need to know about the people. I don't care if you're working in the consultancy space or in our space. At some point, you're putting together a project list and you're going to say, this is how many hours you're going to get, and these are the types of people that are going to do that work. I think now there's more balance coming in to say, yeah, it's going to be this, but as we are driving some of the efficiency, if you will, and effectiveness, by the way, right? Like, we've gotten ourselves over the years, certainly in the media business, we built it on talking too much about efficiency. We can drive efficiency rather than balancing that with effectiveness from time to time. So if you balance that out, but more and more it is, if I'm going to drive that kind of efficiency, right? How are we going to collectively benefit from those things? And is it going to deliver, to Helen's point, growth? Because when you just treat it as a line item on a spreadsheet, that's never going to be perceived as value. You're never going to be perceived as a valuable asset to them.
And to your question, do I see it in all of our clients? No, but I see it increasingly becoming a larger component, or the third component to how we're, so it's no longer just one or two items, it's coming increasingly, it's a separate bit. Is it the only bit? No, but it's increasingly becoming a more integral part of how we are measured and remunerated.
And I will also say, the ones that are fixated just on time, material, cost, drive that, go look at their business results. Look at companies that we all know, some of them, that are just simply fixated on driving costs down, and look at how their businesses are performing.
And some clients who have done that, right, have also recognized that, and then have switched gears to kind of say, actually, we've learned, and we're going in a different direction, right? Because that
was your Walmart analogy, right? So we've businesses who are like, hey, we've seen ourselves.
Yes, that was the quote
by Walmart.
Yes,
that was Michael.
I made the point that there are some clients who you talk to who have likened some of the things that we have seen over the last 5 or so years going on in our industry to the way some of them had been treated by a Walmart in the past. And if anybody from Walmart is on this call, love Walmart, it's great. But you know, they were like, we're big and we can force these kinds of changes. And by the way, it actually was the thing that started the snowball. So I think we need to shift some of the conversation.
So let's talk a little more about just the agency model in general. So you know, Mark Reed, as we know, stirred up a little bit of controversy recently by talking about the average age of WPP employees, which, as we know, is not unique to I'm pretty sure it's not unique to WPP. And agencies in general, you know, are built on a model of young talent. Is that a problem that needs to be fixed? You know, is that actually causing, you know, with the churn that you have in, which the kind of notorious churn you have in the junior ranks, like, is that actually driving hidden costs in the agency model and something that needs to change and that can change?
I'm not sure how it's driving hidden costs, but I definitely think that that diversity in its, you know, in its broadest sense, you know, is an important issue for every company. And age, I think historically, age, you know, agencies where, you know, if you're an agency, it's a young person's game, etc., unless you're like the CEO or the management. And I think that that's also changing, because increasingly it's about, you know, about people. And if you have the right outlook, and that's something, age is irrelevant in that sort of sense. It's really about your aptitude to say, are you constantly learning? Are you constantly, I mean, literally every day, you know, you have to learn something, because the media industry is not static. It changes every hour even. But it is something that I look at from a diversity standpoint, because not only is it a requirement for us as a business to generate better work, it's also a requirement that our employees are judging us by, to say, you know, do you have a diverse workforce? And it's incumbent on us to make sure that we deliver on that. And that cuts across age, gender, ethnicity, you know, neurodiversity, etc. I mean, when I was running the UK, I said, we are an agency for the UK. We should reflect the UK population. Okay, that is from, you know, left leaning, right leaning, to ethnicity, etc. It also comes down to, I think, the other bit is also education. That I think that the other bit is that we're, you know, we need to start looking at, well, what about school leavers? There are loads of people who are extremely talented who have chosen or have not been given the opportunity to go to university. Did that make them any less capable in terms of being a success in our industry? Absolutely not. So we have to rethink a lot of the rules that we have grown up with, or that have been embedded with, because they're not fit for what the future is, really.
Right. I got my degree in philosophy and now work in advertising.
Yeah, but no one gets their degree in media. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, no one goes. It's like you fall into it every time. How did you start? By accident.
I mean, there are people who get their degree in communication. I'm actually supporting what you're saying, Helen.
Okay, good. Brian, just to be clear. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think to your point about cost, there is something, and I you know, I don't know what the answer is. That basically what happens is, most of the time you come into this industry at a pretty low salary.
Yes.
Because of the way the machinations of contracts work in our business, you leave, you could sort of double your salary. And if you were my age, I'm 25, you would leave to go double your salary, right? If you could. So I do think there is, to your point about, I don't know if it's a hidden cost, but I think the churn.
Hidden to some.
Yeah.
Some people see it, others don't, right?
Yeah, but I think that the real point is there's probably a cost complexity in there that if we change the way we remunerate people when they join, it might actually alleviate some of the churn, thereby probably taking out some of that cost. I think to the point about the relative age of the industry, I think that that's a good thing. I do think at one point there was an issue, and we were talking about this a little bit, where people aged out. And I think that's part of the reason was because that leadership had an unwillingness to change and to actually listen to the people that are in your agency, to understand what they're working on, how they view the world, and the thing that, and the changes that are going on in it. And in a way, I hate to use the word, you just kind of your thinking became a little antiquated. And then all of a sudden, right, if the relationship with your client is starting to change, boom, you have a bit of an issue. I have always found it to be a good thing that we have work to do, the diverse makeup though of our teams and the age spans, because to me, it keeps me, young in thought. And I think that that's a good thing. Not to mention the fact we work in a fairly dynamic industry. I was talking about this yesterday with you guys. I knew about Facebook before anybody I knew about it, right? And looking at it now, same thing. I sit on many client councils and technology partners, and it's a really exciting thing. So I'm sure I view myself as a bit younger than other people do, but I've never found it to be much of an issue.
Well, I've heard you both have really hot TikTok channels that we should all be subscribing to, right?
Michael does, apparently. Michael does. His is amazing. Mine not so. Mine's not so.
Do not.
So, I mean, just to push on that one a little, I've always wondered, does the combination of, agencies having their primary places of employment be in high cost cities like New York and London, combined with the, requirement generally for a college degree, actually create a gate into the agency world that only people with a certain degree of privilege can actually step over, because it's really maybe impossible to afford a New York rent and your student loans unless you've got no loans and somebody's paid for your college. If that do you agree? Is that crazy? Or B, does COVID actually change that, because all the barriers are kind of dropping?
That's a pretty complex question. I don't know if the location of the industry is as much an issue as perhaps some of the other barriers. I mean, I had student loans relative to what I started out making years ago, and managed through some help and other things, roommates, et cetera, to work through that. I think I think a more fundamental issue is the one that Helen was bringing up, which is, do we notionally need a 4-year college degree to bring somebody into our industry to learn how to do media? I had never used a spreadsheet when I took my first job at Ogilvy, right? A woman by the name of Nadine, who took a chance on me. I didn't even know I didn't know what a formula was. I knew nothing, right? I didn't learn it in school, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So I think maybe we just need to change. And again, I don't know if this just applies to us. Our fundamental ideas as to what a qualified candidate is at an entry-level position in our industry. I think that's how I would think about it.
And I agree. I mean, I literally, a lot of the, we have an apprenticeship scheme here, and that has opened my eyes massively to the fact that actually even, we're now on our third or fourth year of it, and it has physically and palpably changed the feeling of the agency to have different types of people coming in. We see different ideas being generated. And it's amazing to see actually, and everyone's game, frankly, has gone up, right? Because it's, it's new, different types of people, different types of stimulus, and everyone kind of leans in. If you go into the same room and you have the same types of people who've had the same backgrounds and the same experiences, you can kind of predict what everyone's going to say. When you go into a room and it's all very different, you start to unpack things, and you create, there's usually some tension, but then from that tension, you get something that is good. And I do think that potentially COVID, for me, what COVID has done is basically said, look, the world looks and feels very different. We've always been talking about the world is changing, blah, 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 blah. But this has been a marked physical line that said, the world is in a different place. And what it gives us the opportunity is to say, why are we applying the old ways, the old, rules to a future which actually no one can predict, because no one predicted we would be here at this moment.
No kidding.
With all of these things, no one in a million years could have predicted it. So let's use this as an opportunity to jettison kind of some of the old ways of thinking. And some of the old ways, when I say old ways, are still, I think important in terms of the core principles of marketing. But I think some of the other bits is, let's chuck out the stuff that we know isn't working and try something new. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. Then try something else. Because we know there's no rule book. There's no rule book for the next,
Yeah. This is
years.
Think back to all the slides that you maybe presented and seen that said the pace of change faster than ever before. Like, yeah. I hope we never see one of those again.
No,
let's go
that's
back
an
to slowing
automated.
pace of
We
change.
can automate that slide and just literally
Okay.
update it all the time. Ching. Yeah.
Sorry, Michael. Go ahead. You were going to say.
No, I was just going to say, Brian, that I was at a conference earlier this morning, and we had a guest speaker, and he, which is something I've been thinking about, talked about the real societal issues, like the inequality gap that is going to be one of the major byproducts around the world of COVID. And so if we don't think differently about some of these things, the society is going to be in a really big, going to have a really big problem on its hands. So I think
well, at the very least, it's going to affect how your customers are investing their ad dollars, because people are going to have less money. Certain people are going to have a lot less money to spend, and others might have more. So we're getting into the home stretch here. So I wanted to transition a little bit to unbundling, in-housing, and what I see is unbundling in some cases. But just wanted to plug for the crowd, if anyone else wants to submit some more questions in our last couple minutes here, love to hear them. But I think let's transition into that. We touched a little bit on the in-housing trend. I think what I heard from you guys in our prep call is, there was a really strong initial push into in-housing because of concerns around transparency, real legit concerns around transparency, and it's continued from I think interest and control over data, and then really thinking about who's good at what. To your point, Helen, am I good at activation versus analytics versus strategy as a brand, or where can my agency help? So how are you guys reacting to this? Is it something that's going to continue, or are we going to reach a plateau where it's maybe stops because the brands can't keep up with the trends that an agency can, or is it just going to shift your engagement? Helen, to you, like where is this taking you guys? What do you see happening?
I think we're still in the middle of it, right? Because I definitely see, I've seen some clients in-house and then decide actually, and then reverse out of that in some ways and decide actually it's not a unilateral decision. They decide actually what we're really good at is do it, we want to keep this and this and this, but we want to push this back out. And it goes back to your point about holding companies, about saying we can't be good at everything. And that goes the same for clients. I think for us, it's just about being more flexible in terms of saying, how can we adapt and how can we kind of assist in it? And I also think, though, that there are certain sectors and certain industries who are probably more predisposed to in-housing than, say, others. So if you look at a company that sits on a large amount of first-party data or their own data, and because it's not just about transparency, but it's also about the responsibility that now we have over that data. Right, so that's legally another big correct, and that's another key element. Whereas there are other industries and other sectors who have less first-party data. So actually, what they actually need is they need to come to us to get more data points so they can create something unique and bespoke. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, but I think we're sort of feeling our way through it. But we do have clients who are in-house, and we also have clients who are in-house and then out-house, and we have clients who said, no thank you, that's not what I want, that's not for us.
I think it's going to be ever evolving, frankly. We have one client, we have 12 different service models with them. We have others that have absolutely no interest in taking it in-house. I think increasingly, and actually to Helen's point too, the clients, there are certain clients that actually should have done this a long time ago in certain areas, because they sit on so much of their own data. Like, why would you want to just cede that over to somebody else? It just doesn't make sense. I think you'll continue to see clients wanting to get closer to their consumers, which is really now what is at the heart at most of this. And that could be, they want to own their own tech deals or their tech contracts. and agencies go deal with that. It could be some of them want to actually do the activation themselves, and it could be hybrid. But I don't, you know, I think where we are is generally where it's going to be. It's just a matter of what the component parts are going to be. And again, going back to your initial question around agencies and holding companies, you know, if you fight this trend, you are going to lose, if you can even call it a trend anymore, and you will not grow. You have to figure out how you want to play in this new ecosystem, would be my advice.
The reed bending with the wind in you know, your kind of Zen philosophy there. But I think to your point, it's a question of like who can invest where? What can you invest in, right? Like I can invest in different parts of you know, the supply chain than you guys can. You guys can invest in different parts of the supply chain than the brands can, right? And I think it's kind of how do you mix and match there. Cool. So see what my last kind of questions are here.
This is the big one. This is always it's the surprise question.
No, I think this
Make it a good one, Brian. Come on.
Oh, come on. Well, well, hey, let's go back to the top. Is S4 another holding company?
I mean,
what's Martin Sorrell up to? What do we think? Can we talk about him, or is that still off? Is that off limits because of the WPP
we can talk.
issue?
We can talk. No, I mean,
whoever you want to talk about, Brian. I think it's a holding company, right?
It seems it's a holding company, right?
He's taking assets and bringing them together.
So yes, it is a holding company. Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
he himself would say that.
The only difference is he no longer wears suits. That's the only difference, right? He now wears jeans and, you know, whatever, t-shirts. I'm sure they're expensive ones, but he's not running around in suits. But yeah, he's collecting assets in his new version, which he thinks has utility for clients. And he's calling it S4 Capital as opposed to, you know, WPP. But it's a, you know, it's a collection of assets. That's what a holding company is.
And I think that I think that the services that they offer and the direction they're going isn't actually that different to everybody else. I think that's, you know, we're all pushing in that sort of, you know, digital transformation, you know, experiences, all of those sorts of things being considered is all kind of, everyone is doing this.
Yeah, I mean, my question, I think, is whether they're just offering the same services on a slightly more unbundled basis, right? Is what's happening with in-housing, you know, in general, is what's happening with, you know, what S4 is trying to do, just an unbundling of the agency model, right? And are you guys going to unbundle some of your services, you know, in response to that? I guess would be what I'd wonder.
I won't answer the second part, but on the first part, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would frame it as unbundling as to what he's doing. You know, I mean, he is, and maybe we should have him on here, but I think he's carved out a particular space in the ecosystem that he wants to play in at the moment. By the way, he spends an awful lot of time talking about holding companies, and in particular, certain assets within those holding companies, right? Which, if you ask me, is probably something that he is thinking about what he wants S4 to ultimately become. But he's acquiring companies that play in a particular part. I don't know that it's unbundled from what we're doing. And frankly, in certain cases, it's duplicative. Like we go up against some of his companies from time to time with some of ours.
Yeah.
In integrated pitches.
Yes, well, not even
interesting.
Not even integrated. But sometimes we lose. So
yeah, and I guess the other thing, unbundling. I mean, you know, we work in media agencies, so sometimes we don't do, for some clients, we don't do everything. Yeah. So in that sense, if we say, well, that is unbundling because they use us for a certain part of the ecosystem, and then they choose to use someone else for another part. So you could argue that's unbundling. So we do unbundle our services. Yeah. So we certainly do that already. I don't think that's just a way in which the clients want to work. But I agree with Michael. I don't think he's talking about unbundling. I think he's just simply, he wants to kind of integrate those and offer different things and different solutions that connect the pieces together. I don't think he wants to keep them all discrete.
You know, most of the time, by the way, Brian, when you work on a client, where it is not consolidated into one holding company. And there are a lot of those, right? Most of the agencies work generally collaboratively together. Sure, there's some stuff that, wish you had all this or that, but like most of the time, if we're working with an S4 company or a WP creative agency, something else, we're at the end of the day, we're all trying to work seamlessly together, because if we're not, we're ultimately
all at risk. We're all at risk. I mean, clients have made it very clear that they expect it, teams to work as teams. And if that team includes from different holding companies or even something different, you work as a team.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think that what's interesting is that sometimes, and we do that all the time. And I think media agencies are used to working with other media agencies, and so similar with different creative agencies. So I don't think that we've been doing that for years, actually. And I think there's very clear rules of swim lanes and lines of engagement. And I think it's relatively straightforward. I mean, yes, there's going to be niggles and sort of fights, et cetera, but it's usually pretty collegiate generally, unless we're in a pitch, of course. And then I just want to beat Michael, really.
Doesn't happen very often.
Well, this week, that's true. This week, that's true.
Last chance for some questions from the crowd. If we don't have any, I think I'll turn it over to you guys for some last words here. Michael, do you want to take us out?
Sure.
We'll hear from Helen.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Brian. It's been fun. I don't know if I get to do this, but I think the one takeaway I would ask of the people is, I think that we work in a great industry that's at a pivotal point and is going to drive some pretty substantial change if we get it right. I don't think, the notion of a holding company is a negative thing, but what we were talking about yesterday is I defy people to figure out what they don't experience through media anymore. And we talk about that's where people find love, sadly, but that's where people question, that's where people protest now. And that's ultimately is where consumers experience and have their best experience with brands and make those decisions. And so do we have some things we need to work on? Yes. Are we evolving and are we changing? Yes, but I think we always have. And also let's not forget that, and again, I will speak from a media agency perspective. Media agencies, albeit Carat's been around for a while, but as a grown-up sort of industry, didn't really start until the early 2000s. And it's so in the general scheme of things, it's still kind of in its infancy, and I think that that's a good thing. That's what I would leave you guys with.
Helen, in our last minute, what would you have our guests come away with?
I mean, I say, look, agencies are undergoing transformation just as much as you are. And agencies are being disrupted just as much as our clients are, and we are reacting, accordingly. And I think the other bit is for me, in terms of, I agree with all of the, for me, I have worked in the media industry for a long time, so I'm one of those old people. And I stayed in this industry because it doesn't stay the same. It is never the same. It is always changing.
Never boring.
It's never boring. It's every day something new, some new development, some new piece of tech, something happens. And we have to react to it. We have to react to it and adapt to it and kind of integrate it quite quickly. I think my parting message is to say that agencies are more than the Excel spreadsheet that sometimes we're measured against. And that if you ask us, if you give us an opportunity to rethink the rules, I guarantee you will be surprised that actually the work that we're going to come back is going to drive growth for you, rather than just looking at saving you some money, because cost is important. But I think if that's going to come at the expense of growing your business, then it's the wrong choice.
Well, thank you both again. I really enjoyed talking to both of you today. I hope our audience feels the same.
I enjoyed talking to Michael less, actually.
Okay. We'll have this up on YouTube in a couple days if anybody wants to pass this around, and hope that people can join us next week to talk about having a brand voice on social media when some crazy shit is going on those platforms. So thanks again, both of you, and
Thank you.
Be well. Thanks.
Thank
everybody.
you all. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.